Hello and welcome to the 38th episode of the Adamola Bookman podcast. My name's Al Bond and I'm with my co-host John Coughlin. Hi, Johnny.
Hey, Al, how are you doing?
Yeah, tickety-boo, thank you, Johnny. This week we are doing The Three Lives of the Kaiser, the Franz Beckenbauer story by Uli Hesse.
Franz Beckenbauer, one of their greatest ever players, now a World Cup winning coach. West Germany win it after 54 and 74 here in Rome in 1990, and they see off Argentina by a narrow...
So, Johnny, as we always do with this, before you read the book, what did you know about Franz Beckenbauer?
Fuck all. Very, very little. I knew that he was a legendary player in that kind of really upper echelon bracket. I did know that he won the World Cup, I think, as a player and a manager. And I knew that he was involved in a kind of boring football administration capacity with Bayern Munich. So I guess that covers the three lives of the Kaiser.
I knew quite a lot about him. What I didn't know until 10 minutes ago, when I just checked his Wikipedia page, is that he was dead. I read the whole book thinking the man was still alive. It's completely changed my perception on it all. I'm super sad. Yeah, I didn't. Genuinely, up to 15 minutes ago, I didn't realise he was dead. I really didn't. So that makes me sad. But I think I've mentioned other players on this in this way before, but he's very much the Mount Rushmore of footballers, isn't he? I mean, pre-Messi and Ronaldo, I'd say the top four is your Pele, your Maradona, your Cruyff, and your Beckenbauer, right? That were the upper echelon for when I was a kid.
And it's remarkable because he's a defender. He must have been amazing. Who are the most famous defenders ever?
Yeah, Baresi, your Maldinis. But yeah, he's notable because he's the only defensive-minded player who's ever won multiple Ballon d'Ors. I say multiple, two. But I was looking back at some old footage of De Kaiser. And the lad is absolutely magnificent, Johnny. He's amazing. Like, of all the, old antique footage we've watched of players, he's clearly the best. Wow, the kid is amazing. He just glides past players. If they talk about his strength and his elegance, no kidding. He can tackle. He's got a super shot. Another thing which makes him look better, Johnny, is the footage from the Bundesliga in the 1960s is unbelievable. It's so good. It's so crisp. It looks like the stuff in the 90s. It's worth having a look. The footage is amazing. Whatever cameras they were using in Germany back then, it's wild. Honestly, it looks better than when you watch 90s footage of a Premier League. So that made him look better. Also, what makes him look better is his beautiful Adidas kit all the time. Oh, the elegance of the man. Yeah, Johnny, I have been bowled over by young Francie. I mean, it would be a surprise to no one that he was good at football, but fucking hell, he really was, Johnny. He really was fabulous.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? Here's a question for you, Al. Who do you think would win between Beckenbauer's 74 World Cup winning team and Beckenbauer's 99 World Cup winning team?
1990 World Cup winning team. It would definitely be Beckenbauer's 74.
Oh, not according to our supercomputer, Al.
Is that right? Look at the attention to detail we've got here.
Yeah.
Cross-pod tie-in. Excellent work, Johnny.
I asked the AI who would win between these two teams. And if they played 100 times, what would be the average and all the rest of it? And it said that West Germany 1990 would win 46% of the time compared to West Germany 74's 36, with 18% as draws. There you go, no? And then actually, I asked for one match simulation and it gave me a draw. Which is kind of disappointing.
Well, it was stocked, that Germany team, wasn't it? With recognisable names, your Paul Breitners, your Uli Hesse.
Wasn't that 1990 team kind of considered shit? Or is it just that particular World Cup, even though it's such a landmark in everybody's mind of our generation anyway? But the football at that World Cup was poor, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, it was that World Cup which sort of brought in the modern game as it was, like the banning of the tackle from behind, goalkeepers not picking the ball up. Yeah, that was because it was very low on average, like 2.2 goals a game or something. It was like historically low, and yeah, like FIFA saw they had to do something, which is strange, isn't it? Because yeah, in the minds of certainly people in England, that World Cup was like the shining achievement of football. What a glorious event it was, but in reality, it was like low scoring.
By the way, you think that every possibility has been covered in, let's say, the world of English football? There's been this type of player, there's been this type of reaction, but I guess every country has its own whatever distinct shit going on, but there's no equivalent in England for a player who was so good and yet so roundly hated as Beckenbauer seems to have been.
Yeah, that's right. Desperately trying to come.
Beckham is the one that comes closest, but that was just for a very finite period of time and for a very specific reason.
I did actually think this a lot. There are comparisons between the two, which is deeply unfair to Franz Beckenbauer being one of the greatest of all time, whereas Beckham being very much flavour of the month and an excellent team. I'm not slagging him off. He was brilliant, but you know what I'm saying. First of all, their names start Beck.
Yeah.
Secondly, they were fashion icons. Beckham shaved his head to public opprobrium, and Beckenbauer grew a natty moustache. Have you seen that picture? He looks absolutely magnificent. He's magnificent. Fucking love this lad. But yeah, that's it. Beckham got his redemption a lot quicker, didn't he? Say his nadir was 1998. Well, his redemption came, 3 years later, the Greece free kick. Whereas Beckenbauer didn't really have that nadir as such. He was just perceived as being lazy and arrogant and also playing for Bayern Munich.
Hollywood FC.
Hollywood FC. But he did get his redemption when he, then won the World Cup. They say that's when he became beloved in Germany, and then when he actually got the World Cup to Germany.
Oh, when you say he won the World Cup, you mean as a manager? It wasn't even enough for Germany when he won the World Cup as a player, it seems. That was how I read this.
No, I think you're right. I mean, is that just the inbuilt loathing of Bayern Munich, though? It's just, like in some ways, no matter what. I mean, you talk
okay, but just
I can't make a comparison.
Let's stick with Beckham. Beckham was playing for Manchester United at a time when Manchester United were loathed by many who weren't Manchester United fans, and he didn't need to win the World Cup in order to become absolutely beloved. All he had to do was score a free kick in a qualifier to get them to the World Cup. The bar is much lower. I got that impression throughout the book. Actually, Germany's pretty tough on people. They were tough on Beckenbauer.
They were tough on Beckenbauer. They're saying that a part of that was like his Bavarian upbringing. He was brought up as strict Catholic, and that it wasn't his tax evasion which really got caught the public's imagination, but it was his serial adultery, which really upset people. There's a stretch where one of his wives talks about being spat at in the street in Germany after he left his wife and kids for her. So yeah, that apparently stood against him, and it was a long time ago as well. I guess attitudes were very different back then. But do you think, though, Johnny, that perhaps the loathing of him is a little bit overstated? Well, let's talk about the how the book is set up.
Let's get into it then, will we? Because we can start it from the Sugar Club in Dublin.
Yeah, okay, so this is how the book is set up. So the author, Uli Hesse, by the way, who is a massive Borussia Dortmund fan, so that might be instructive. Yeah, it was in the Sugar Club in Dublin with Jonathan Wilson, that's right. And Jonathan Wilson asks him, is there a more loathsome bureaucrat in sport than Franz Beckenbauer? And Uli Hesse is taken aback by this. Loathsome, Franz Beckenbauer. And that's when he says when the seed was sown to write this book, right?
Yes. And then he thought, I'm going to show Jonathan Wilson a thing or two by writing a book about how beloved Beckenbauer is. Whereas my big takeaway from the book is everyone hated Beckenbauer. So I kind of, even before any of the guitar stuff, any of the bribery stuff, it doesn't seem that it ever affected Beckenbauer that he wasn't liked in Germany. He didn't seem to care. But there was that period between 1990 and 2006 where he could do no wrong in Germany. But anyway, like, this is all on the basis of the book, though, you know? And, like, maybe there are other perspectives, too.
Yeah, I didn't get that exactly like you did. Uli Hesse, the writer, by the way, I find a very amiable companion in this book. I really enjoyed his writing. I absolutely love this book, Johnny. I mean, I get that right from the get-go. I thought it was super.
Do you like a lot of chat about Byzantine boardroom intrigue? Is that your thing, Al?
Yeah, apparently it is. I mean, I've got to tell you, I absolutely devoured this book. I mean, for a little bit of context, I read this book whilst I was on a cruise ship, so I might have been reading this book in slightly favourable conditions, so I was rather relaxed and happy reading it. But I didn't have any issues with the boardroom stuff, I thought it was all kind of fun. And also necessary to explain his future issues with the tax services in Germany.
But also, so many German names. And of course, I listened to it. And the guy who read it, he really leaned into the German on the names. And that I really did enjoy.
Well, that is funny, isn't it?
Okay, so let's talk about Beckenbauer then. He was born in Gessing in Bavaria. Do you know what? This was really quite remarkable, the stuff about his uncle, wasn't it? So his uncle played for Bayern Munich.
And that only became apparent many years after the event.
He just never told anyone. The family didn't know about it.
But it strikes me that like Bayern Munich were like a little pub team back then when he played for them, like not the Colossus that they would become under Beckenbauer's helm.
Yeah, fair enough. But nevertheless, if your nephew is essentially leading that charge to them becoming this huge, behemoth of a football club, you think you'd mention, I used to play for that. So Bayern has a Jewish background, and this administrator or manager, I can't remember, was pushed out. And what Uli Hesse says is that the uncle was kind of on the left of the political spectrum, and he had a combination of injuries and maybe some kind of political issues with the way things were going at Bayern. So he kind of stepped away from it. But yeah, pretty remarkable. And the other thing that is really remarkable is he's born in Gessing in Bavaria, as I said, and he's brought up in this house which has a few apartments in it. And he's playing with his brother, who was a really good footballer, his older brother, and a girl who was a neighbour, Gitta Schmidt, who went on to play for Germany and was like the best female player in Germany. And they're from the same house, different families. That is amazing, right?
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? I wonder who inspired who.
Yeah, maybe that the development helps each other.
What else is remarkable is that he grew up an 1860 Munich fan, who were the big team in Munich at that time. But in Germany, there's a very infamous slap which Beckenbauer received from an 1860 Munich player whilst he was playing against them. Is that right? Or playing for them? He was
leaving whatever team he was with, which wasn't Bayern, and he was planning to go to 1860, the Blues. And then he got der Schlapp in the face from one of their defenders, and he said, I'm not going there. And he went to Bayern instead. And again, just to stress, this could have went either way, right? Because Bayern wasn't anything at that point. In fact, he joined as the Bundesliga came into existence, and Bayern were in the second division, and 1860 Munich were in the first division. So, yeah, it could have went a whole different way if Beckenbauer had joined 1860 Munich. Although it does, he seems to have been the kind of jewel in the crown, but they had a fantastic generation of players coming through. Of course, some of those names, like Gerd Müller, of course, we've heard of, the bomber, great name. But I would have heard of Uli Hesse because he was an administrator at Bayern Munich later. Bertie Vogts, I know from his management days. So some of the names did register with me, but of course, some of them I had no idea.
But a lot of them did register, and your Gunter Netzer, I didn't realise what a big deal he was at the time. Paul Breitner,
Breitner. His book would be worth reading, I think, because he hated Beckenbauer so much. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he did. He says there's a quote the author attributes to him 10 years after his dealings with Beckenbauer. And it says the venom that he can still conjure up says more about Breitner than it does about Beckenbauer, but it still suggests that Beckenbauer received a lot of preferential treatment at Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of things. The slap is a big deal in Germany, right? This is like, if this slap hadn't have happened, then Bayern Munich wouldn't have gone on to be Bayern Munich.
Yeah, it is like the kind of slap that changed football history, I suppose.
So much so that 3 different people claim to be the person that administered the slap to Beckenbauer. But the truth is, I think we'll never know.
And that's the fun thing about reading these books, isn't it? When you're talking about characters of this gravity in that kind of formative period of football, it does feel really things feel significant. You feel like you're reading something other than just football history, but like kind of history itself, which obviously football history is history, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like someone had slapped Bill Shankly and he'd fucked off to join Everton instead. Like, it's the sliding doors moment that was that.
Yeah. And so around early enough, so he goes to Bayern Munich, and a theme which repeats itself throughout the book is he immediately got a colleague pregnant.
Yeah, he'd already had one kid out of wedlock when he was like 16 or something, and when it was suggested to him that he should marry this woman, he said, "That's absolutely absurd. I'm not going to do that."
You said earlier that it was, the time would have dictated perceptions, views of him, of course, because necessarily society was more conservative then. But I really did enjoy that when he was going on tours at the time as a teenager. Was it for Germany or for Bayern? But one of the coaches had to share a bed with him. That was really fun.
Yeah, he does cut a dashing figure though. He really is. He's an elegant young man. Lovely smile.
This is how Uli Hesse put it. He impregnated a woman he refused to marry, and then he later impregnated a married woman who he did marry. That's kind of complicated.
Yes, it is. This was Brigitte. Was it Brigitte was his first wife?
Yes. And Brigitte and Franz adopted his first son. But I lost track. Of his... Well, it seems that he was always cheating on Brigitte, and then eventually he left her and then had various kind of relationships. Like, who am I to judge ultimately? But it was notable.
Well, that's it. When he left Brigitte Wittmann, that was the beginning of his second life in the writer's framing of the story. But just very quickly back to Bayern Munich. So at the time, Bayern Munich were a provincial team, really, and there was the opportunity to go to AC Milan, who were at the time were the behemoths of Italy. That didn't come about because apparently Pak Duik knocked Italy out of the World Cup, playing for North Korea, and from that point, Italy would not allow any foreign imports because it was ruining their game. And again, another sliding doors moment. If the Kaiser had headed off to Milan, what would they be? Oh, another thing he wanted was Beckenbauer really wanted a nickname. He goes on about this, and the author talks about this a lot, how he didn't have a nickname. There's a player called Franz Roth who was called the Bull, and apparently Beckenbauer was very, very jealous about that. The writer continually refers to Franz Roth as Moo Moo for the rest of the book, which is kind of endearing, I guess.
But that thing about the Kaiser, obviously the book is called The 3 Lives of the Kaiser, but he really goes into forensic detail about where the name came from, and it was this journalist who wrote it in this article, even though that one, people have said it was this article 2 years later, but I went back and found it. It's like, okay, man. And he keeps coming back to it.
Yeah, there's a picture of him looking up at a statue. That's when it began. There's a picture of him with the Kaiser. Isn't it?
Yeah, Franz Joseph, was it?
It's a good nickname for him.
Was that the Kaiser of Austria? Was it Franz Joseph? There's a picture of him at that. But also, before we get to, like you mentioned, the World Cup in 1966, but even before that, this footballing sweeper, which the Italians later called a libero, this was his position. And there were Italian players who played it since, but English football doesn't really have this, does it?
I can remember way back when they always used to talk about Glenn Hoddle. Get Glenn Hoddle, sticking behind the centre backs, getting there, like just spraying the ball around. That was always like a dream for people. I think people talked about Beckham that way as well. Maybe one day he could play the libero role, but I think there's just no room for that now in modern football, is there? I mean, there's no chance for a libero. No, there certainly has never been that position in English football, so I've been watching.
So we say Pirlo, when we did his book, he was quite deep lying ball player, right? But Beckenbauer is further back still, right?
It just negates any use of an offside trap, really, doesn't it? If you're playing with a sweeper, you're never or if you're playing with a libero, you just can't play offside. And I think that's just what rules it out of a modern game with high lines, etc.
Also, it sounds like he was a prick when he was a young fella on the pitch, and a former coach was saying when he saw him being played in this position, he was saying, "Why on earth are you playing Beckenbauer there? We only ever played him up front like a youth coach." And he was like, "Yeah." The coach at Bayern, whatever, the youth team was like, "Yeah, we've played him up front, but all he ever does is spend his time complaining about how bad the passes are and how bad everyone else is." So we've just stuck him in there at the back to keep him busy. So
yeah, Beckenbauer's he's like the only youth player in the history of football who's argued to go in defence, right? Who on earth ever volunteers to go in defence? You get put in defence because you get put in defence. If you're any good going forward, he's the only player who's argued, like, I want to play in defence, I wanted to play in defence. And he was characterised as being cowardly, right, for that by Germans, because they say he didn't want to be in the thick of the battle, but he felt that he could do his best work sitting in the back.
And this is presumably part of the reason that he was disliked in Germany as well. Is he's distinctly un-German in many ways, isn't he? I guess much like English football, German football was about the rough and tumble. And this guy he was above the fray, really.
He was above the fray, but again, if you watch the highlights, he literally is above the fray. It's like he's playing a different game. Like, he just goes past people. He is that much better than everyone else. I cannot. How much better this footage is of any other of these like old players. Oh, he's so magnificent. He's so magnificent.
And if he is the yin, who is his yang?
All right, so yeah, the player you're referring to, who is known as in German as a Vorstopper, was Georg Schwarzenbeck.
No, I'm not talking about that at all. But you tell me what you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about Georg. This is who we played with for the German national team.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Big, strong, ugly centre-back who worked in tandem with Beckenbauer. And he was so ugly that a renegade poet called Wolf Wondraschek wrote this poem about Georg Schwarzenbeck. How strange that someone, square like an empty box of sweets, can hit something that is round. It's profound, Johnny. It's profound.
Yeah, that is
made
weird,
in the book.
Who I was talking about was Robert Schwan.
The business manager, of course, the business manager. The ubiquitous business manager.
Yeah, the fella who's essentially bending the law. Initially for Bayern Munich, I suppose, he's a kind of business manager, but he becomes Beckenbauer's man. And he's involved in every kind of shady shit that Beckenbauer pulls in his life when he gets in trouble with the German tax authorities. And then he's involved with this stuff later with Qatar, although he was dead by the time they found it out.
I'd like to say he's a Mr. 10% man, but he wasn't. He was a 20% man, the greedy bastard.
So Robert Schwan, Schwan means swan. So that's
who'd have thunk.
The big white bird. Sorry, and you mentioned the '66 World Cup. Do you think it was a tactical mistake for Germany to put Beckenbauer as man-wrecking Bobby Charlton in the final of the '66 World Cup?
I would be reluctant to give my views on the tactical decisions made by either of those team managers on that day so long ago. It does seem remarkable, though. They talk about it. In fact, I watched a clip from Bobby Charlton talking about it like 35 years later in his customary charismatic style. Always a pleasure to see Bobby Charlton, isn't it? No. But But yeah, they just negated each other, right? They took two of the finest footballers on the planet and they simply negated each other for 120 minutes. So perhaps it was a mistake. And obviously the Germans feel robbed by that whole game. It was interesting to see that Germany had such a mental hoodoo about England during those days. It seems fanciful now, having had the life I've had and living in fear of a German national side, that back then it was reversed and they all feared England.
Did you find the stuff about the German league interesting? Because I must admit, I wasn't that really plugged into that.
As I say, I mean, I just rattled through this book very happily, but I was also drinking a good deal of drink packaged scotch whilst doing so. So yeah, I guess that might have helped it along. Like, yeah, I didn't mind it. I mean, it was fascinating maybe a strong word, but it was interesting to see how Germany went from nothing to being the most hated team in all of Germany in the space of like 10 years.
Bayern, you mean? Yeah.
Oh yeah, how Bayern went from from a second division provincial side to like 3 times conquerors of Europe in the space of basically 10 years. It's genuinely an astonishing story, isn't it?
Well, they won the league 4 times in Germany between 69 and 74, and they won 3 European Cups on the bounce. So when you think about it, like, this is 10 years, more or less, a little bit over 10 years after he joins. And the team is, like I said, they're in the second division of the German league. And I guess at that particular time, things could have went very different in loads of countries. And throughout the book, Hesse makes comparisons between Beckenbauer and his great friend, Johan Cruyff. And it was similar with Ajax. And when we read the book about Cruyff, it was kind of a similar thing, that Ajax went from nothing to, also winning all of these European championships. So there were a lot of parallels there. But yeah, it was quite important time in history. But yeah, I guess winning all those championships will make you hate it.
Yeah, it was all of these things, and he was seen as particularly. Yeah, there's a description here. He is mentally lazy and taciturn. This combination creates the impression of arrogance. But you could say that about almost all footballers. I mean, you could say that about Cole Palmer immediately, couldn't you? Like, mentally lazy and taciturn.
People love Cole Palmer, though.
I don't like his sulky little face. No more effort, lad. Come on.
People do not really like Foden. I get that impression. There's no great love for Foden, is there?
It's his face, right? It's just his horrible, chavvy little haircut and his mean little face.
Yeah, if he had lovely bouffant hair, you'd forgive the face. But it's that little ratty, like, straight line fringe. That's the problem there.
You ever seen that picture of a Foden cat? A cat. You just Google Foden and cat. You'll see it straight away. It's wild.
What about Rooney, though? England never really loved Rooney, did they?
I would disagree with that. I loved him. I mean, I loved him so hard. I think he's an example of how the media was at that time, how you could just get away with saying, look at that thick, dumb idiot, Wayne Rooney, and it would be absolutely fine because he was rich. Look how stupid and ugly he is. That was basically the tabloid patter at the time. I think the man on the street is very fond of Wayne Rooney.
Rooney's funny because, Kane has since surpassed him, but Rooney got, he's the all-time top scorer for United. He was the all-time top scorer for England, and somehow he didn't live up to the expectation. That's quite remarkable, I think.
It is. I think his great crime was being at the same time as Messi and Ronaldo and just not being as good as those, frankly. If he hadn't had to co-live with those players at the time, people would just recognise how fabulous he was. Concentrate on the things he can do and not the things he can't do.
So, sorry, they won the World Cup in 1974 after winning the European Championships in 1972.
So this is a time of almost unparalleled success for a footballer and at the time captain of both Bayern Munich and Germany. So he won 3 consecutive European Cups and was holding the World Cup and the European Championships at the same time. Who's had a better run than that?
Pelé won 3 World Cups. That's not bad.
No, not at all.
When we read the Cruyff book, of course, we were on Cruyff's side. Whose side are you on now? Al, you Beckenbauer lover.
Yeah, I'm on the Beckenbauer side now, 100%. I just find him such a very likable character, just an amiable yes man.
You think he was a yes man?
I think that's how he's categorised here. Is like he just finds it very difficult to say no. It's like, do you want to go and play in New York? Okay. Do you want to come back to Germany? Okay. Do you want to be Germany manager? Okay. Do you want to read?
It seems to me what happened all of the time with those things is people would ask Beckenbauer, "Are you into this?" And he'd be like, and then Robert Schwan would be like, "How am I going to engineer this?" And that's what would happen. Literally, that's what happened for most of those things. Like at one point when he was in the US and they were trying to get him back to come back to Germany to go to Hamburg, and some whatever football administrators come over from Hamburg, and suddenly there's these paparazzis snapping him in the restaurant, and the football guys from Hamburg are like, "What's the story with that? Where to take pictures of us?" But Hess insists that it was actually Robert Schwan, Beckenbauer's own agent, who was trying to force this move through. He was a slippery old rascal, that Robert Schwan.
Yeah, he certainly was. So let's wrap up his first life. So there he is, captain of Bayern Munich in Germany, holder of 3 European Cups, 1 European Championship and 1 World Cup, but he doesn't feel particularly loved at Bayern. And in fact, this is when the New York Cosmos come knocking, and they offer $2.5 million for him, but it ends up that he has to pay 350,000 marks of his own money to facilitate a move to the New York Cosmos. And this is the beginning of his second life. So he immediately leaves his wife and kids and starts up with his new missus, Diana Sandman, and they start a new life in New York. Now, he obviously wasn't playing top-level football here, Johnny, but do you blame him?
It just sounds amazing. New York in 1976. He's living in an apartment that's popular with the Rolling Stones and the Kinks. I don't know what that actually means, popular with them. And he's living beside some, ballet dancer.
Yeah, Nureyev, some ballet dancers. Rudolf Nureyev, who he had to fight off his sexual advances. Like, ding, 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 I got some sex in the book. Like, I liked that.
But hold on. He's this ballet dancer. Like, I have no idea.
No, fair enough. Well, as you know, Johnny, I'm an aficionado of ballet. No, but I think he is. I think he's the most famous ballet dancer of all time. I think.
What about Baryshnikov?
Played in goal for the 1958 Soviets. No, no, that was Yeshin.
But people I do know, because I can name at least 2 of the 3 of them, are the 3 tenors. They're also knocking around as well. Pavarotti and Placido Dominguez were also living in this apartment block, and yeah, it just sounds amazing. So
Monday night for the Cosmos, they just headed down to Studio 54, where sometimes you'd find Grace Jones naked on the back of a white horse. Oh, it's so good, isn't it? So good.
Yeah, he's hanging around with Ali and stuff like that. It does sound amazing. And Kissinger, who's born in Bavaria. All of that sounds just incredible.
Yeah, it's absolutely fabulous. Yeah, so and that's it. In the Cosmos, where obviously the North American Soccer League was ultimately a failure. They were saying like the other teams were pulling in less than like 10,000 fans. But the New York Cosmos were filling out the Giant Stadium, getting 70,000, averaging 60,000 per game. So in New York, it was a huge success.
Yeah, and they were filling the Giant Stadium, and they had Pele and Beckenbauer playing. It's pretty nice.
And even for 2 games, Cruyff as well. Wowee, just so sexy.
Were they on the pitch in the same time? All 3 of them. Cruyff came later,
I don't think Pele was. Yeah, Cruyff came later. And Cruyff was only a 2-game deal, but still, I mean, imagine having claimed to have been at that one.
He played for the Aztecs, the LA Aztecs, as the George Best. It does sound incredible, the people who played there. Like Bobby Moore was there, Gordon Banks, Cruyff, Pele, Ray Wilkins, all the big names.
It's funny how the clubs picked them, eh? Like there's like some like Nomark playing for the New York Cosmos, but then Gordon Banks is at the old Fort Lauderdale. Like, yeah, go on then. Oh, I get Fort Lauderdale, do I? Can I play for New York? No. You're going to Fort Lauderdale. That's not
Fort Lauderdale Kickers.
The Kickers.
I see Seattle were also then called the Seattle Sounders, which is what they're now called now, isn't it? But is there anything like they won a lot? The Cosmos. He played for them 80 times. He played for Bayern Munich for 427 times. He scored 60 goals. But he was at Cosmos for a good chunk as well. He was.
Yeah, he really gave it a good go. I mean, that's how they sold it to him. They said you could go to Italy or Spain and win a championship, but you can go to America and win a country. And whereas he didn't seem to do that. He won the heart of New York, it would appear. Like 70,000 people turned out for his testimonial game when he was leaving.
And I think it was such a marked contrast to how he departed Munich, right? He said, they didn't even really mark the occasion when he left. And there's a really nice line in the book where he says, he goes back to Hamburg initially, and he says, I knew I was home when I heard the cat calls.
Yeah, the cat calls, yeah, that's it. Kaiserslautern, he just got like a whoremonger, whatever that is in German.
But he went to Hamburg for 2 years, but he only played 28 times, and he was injured. And he did go back to the Cosmos, but again, lots of injuries. But that was it. And that was kind of his footballing career. I liked. I was complaining earlier about the kind of boardroom stuff, but there is kind of the kind of dark spectre of football and corruption kind of hanging over a lot of it. That Robert Schwan is a dodgy dealer, and then this Horst Dassler, the son of Adi Dassler, he kind of, as you say, like Beckenbauer was an Adidas man. Beckenbauer wore Adidas his whole career. He had a long contract with them. But he's this guy, Horst Dassler, who took over from Adi, his father, was described as the inventor of corruption in football and sport. I like that.
Hang on, how'd you say that fella's name? Adi? No, because in America it must be Adi, because that's how they say it. Adidas. So any American listeners, when we're talking about Adidas, the correct pronunciation, what you should be hearing is Adidas, which you very wrongly say. Yeah, so Adidas really got him in the shit. A lot. A lot of the corruption charges start with Adidas. But I've got to say, Johnny, it's definitely worth it because he looks so fucking brilliant in the Adidas stuff. The first ever branded Adidas apparel was released in 1978, and it was called the Franz Beckenbauer, and it was a tracksuit. And Johnny, I was fucking salivating at that. I'd like to own that tracksuit more than any other clothes item in the whole world. I feel about looking at Adidas clothes like the way my wife does when she looks at clothes online. I just see a shirt online, I think there's a shirt. But I see an Adidas shirt online, or like some old Mexico Adidas. Oh, imagine how that would feel on my skin. Imagine how I'd look, how people would think of me if I was wearing those beautiful, bright green Adidas with yellow striped tracksuit trousers. Ooh, so lovely. Anyway, yeah, big fan of Adidas and all their work. So well done.
I like this little scene. When he was in Hamburg, one of the reasons he went there is his old Bayern coach Zebet was there, and that was one of the reasons he agreed to go to Hamburg. But Zebet was promptly fired because he was an incoherent alcoholic who was making kind of wild substitutions that didn't make any sense, and the players couldn't understand what he was saying during his team talk, so he was sacked. And then they bring
that wasn't exactly where he was tracked. The final straw was he fell asleep on the bench. But then they couldn't hide it anymore. Even Cloughie didn't fall asleep on the bench. That is shocking. And as we've talked about, those cameras in Germany in those days, they would have zoomed in on him with that excellent footage. They would have all been able to see him being drunk. It was also funny to see that he agreed to return to Hamburg because he thought Hamburg would be a bit more cosmopolitan like New York. It's just like New York, isn't it, Hamburg? Yeah, it's very cosmopolitan, unlike Munich. Provincial little backwater.
Then he said there's another coach who comes in, this guy Happel, who Beckenbauer described as a genius. And he comes in, and in order to get the players' respect, he puts a can on a crossbar and knocks the can off the crossbar from 20 yards and says to the players, "No, you do that." And only one player could do it, Al. And who do you think that player was?
I reckon it's our boy Franz.
How many goals would you need, do you think?
Realistically,
Would you get it in? Would you get it in 100 goes?
I think if I had half an hour, let's not say 100, let's give it a time frame. If I had 30 minutes and someone returning the balls to me when I kicked it, like someone just feeding me balls, I reckon I could do it in half an hour. What do you reckon? How many?
I think you'd be too cross. I think you'd storm off after about 6. I think, yeah, realistically. Yeah, I like to think I could do it in half an hour, fair enough. But there's a good chance that I wouldn't, I think, as well, realistically.
So this really is when his third life starts. And he starts becoming a football manager. Well, he's sort of pushed into it, isn't he? Like during the 1980s, the German team is, by German standards, an absolute disgrace.
Well, the most notable moment in the 80s for German football is probably when Harald Schumacher knocked out that guy Patrick Battiston, right? In 1982.
And Schumacher himself is quite the character, isn't he? He released a warts and all biography of the German football team at the time, and they were like, just like, apparently it was like players would come down to training, like he says, like a wet cloth because they'd been up all night having sex. They were drinking like in a German Munich beer hall. Yeah, it sounds like a lovely old time for the Germans.
Not for Schumacher. He was cross about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you say he was pushed into it. So he was writing for Bild, the newspaper, and he's talking to one of the journalists, and the journalist is giving him a list of names. So this isn't after the 1982 World Cup. And he's giving him a list of names saying, what about Bertie Vogts? And he's like, no. And he's just shooting down all these names. And then he eventually says, but then you're going to have to do it. And then he rubbishes this idea. Absolutely not. And then this journalist goes away and turns this chat into a kind of an actual written conversation, because it was just a chat, I suppose, between colleagues, quote unquote.
The head coach being Derval, and the headline is Derval gone, France, I am ready. Now, apparently this came as a huge surprise to Beckenbauer, but didn't come as a big surprise to the big white bird, who apparently engineered it behind his back. But again, it seems like he's happy enough to do it, doesn't it? Like, he seems like he's happy enough to say, oh, go on, man, I will.
Do you think it's kind of like, yeah, he's kind of his henchman, essentially, carrying out doing his dirty work for him, and he wants to keep his hands clean? That's how you see Robert Schwan.
Yeah, I guess that could just be it, right? Robert Schwan sort of is the guy making the moves, and Beckenbauer just seems to be his pawn being moved about. But it always works out pretty well, doesn't it, for old Franzi?
Yeah. Yeah, he does say that one took him by surprise, but it also could be bullshit. By the way, sticking with Adidas, our friend Bernard Tapie buys Adidas. And then later it's sold to Robert Louis Dreyfus, who is the father of the guy who owns Sunderland now. But do you know who else is related to Robert Louis Dreyfus? The name is a bit of a giveaway.
I believe, Johnny, because I looked it up. It's his second cousin, Julia Louis Dreyfus. How do you get from Beckenbauer to fucking Seinfeld in 2 steps?
Elaine's father was the second cousin of this guy, Robert Louis Dreyfus.
Elaine, the character in Seinfeld. Elaine Bennis's second cousin. Never comes up in the show.
I was reading about that as well. She's worth 250 million now, only from her acting. And she's set to inherit, she hasn't gotten it yet, but her father, who died in 2017, I guess they're dealing with his estate. And his estate is big, $3.4 billion, her father's estate. So she's going to be quite wealthy.
She is. Yes, she is. And she never ages. What a life it is for her.
By the way, would you like, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. Who do you think is the richest actor in the world? The most money?
Cruise.
Cruise is up there, 800 million. The richest actor in the world is Tyler Perry.
Brilliant. He deserves it.
Anyway, okay.
All right.
Yeah, so he gets the job. They're crap for a while. 1990, they put the mighty England out in the World Cup semi-final. And Robson says to Beckenbauer, everybody has played excellently and it's up to the gods now. But the gods favour Germany. And that World Cup final against Argentina is famous, but Argentina were ravaged with injury, and Germany absolutely spanked them. 22 shots on target. And of course, Argentina had a fella sent off, and they won eventually with a penalty. But that was it when Germany decided they liked Franz.
I can assure you I didn't watch that game due to the heartbreak of the semi-final. Yeah, the nicest quote at the end was at the end of the World Cup final. Maradona's tears fell on his Puma boots. Adidas had won. Both teams were wearing Adidas kits.
So he wins the World Cup. There's a moment. All the players are cavorting on the field, and Franz is gliding across the turf by himself, separate from everyone else. And the remarkably high definition German cameras zoom in on him as he shares this, what seems like a private moment with Beckenbauer. And finally, Germany is in love with Franz Beckenbauer.
And so begins his third life, which is as sports administrator.
Well, like he did manage Marseille under Tapie.
Yeah, phenomenally. Yeah, Coach Waddle. There you go. Who knew that? Not me.
And Cantona. So you did know that, Al, because it came up in Cantona's book.
Yeah, but absolutely wild. And then, so then the third act and his ultimate downfall is his role as a sports administrator. So this time they bring him in as a senior position in Bayern Munich. He does well, but then he becomes instrumental in he becomes the figurehead for Germany's vote for the World Cup. Germany's successful. It's not particularly interesting, is it? But there's like a bunch of. He wins the World Cup. He becomes enormously popular in Germany for doing so. But it's revealed later that there's a lot of shenanigans going on in the vote, and
so
that he's
essentially vote buying, and it's Schwan. Beckenbauer signed off on something, but says he wasn't involved in bribery. But yeah, it's a fairly big downfall. It's a downfall from a tall height, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. There's 6.7 million euros, I think, floating around, and it goes from bin Hammam, the Sultan bin Hammam in Qatar, to Robert Schwan, to Robert Louis Dreyfus. I think it ends up, but this is the money which was in contention.
Mm. But also, Germany were widely but expected not to win this. It was expected to go to South Africa. Obviously, it did later go to South Africa in 2010. But this was a big surprise. And it's Der Spiegel, one of the big German newspapers, later did a big investigation into it. And this was kind of what kind of ruined Beckenbauer in his public standing in Germany. And to bring us full circle back to what Jonathan Wilson said to Uli Hesse that night in the Sugar Club in Dublin was what made him such a loathsome figure, loathsome and loathed.
And the author asserts at some point that perhaps if Beckenbauer had just sort of faced the accusations in his traditional nonchalant way and said, well, of course, money has to be moved around for these things, then the German public would have bought that. But he sort of he removes himself from public. Yeah, and and that combined with ill health, really, is the end of his public persona. Yeah, so it all ends in a kind of anticlimactic way. And to my astonishment, he's dead now as well. I had no idea. So yeah, it's kind of a sad end to it all.
I was thinking about this. The lives that these guys led are just so much more interesting than the lives that Ronaldo and Messi lead. Ronaldo's living in some gigantic house in Saudi Arabia, sleeping in a pitch black sleep chamber with these perfectly black goggles over his eyes and being driven from one commercial appointment to the next. That doesn't sound like a pile of fun. Beckenbauer, on the other hand, New York in the 70s, by the time it comes to the World Cup in 2006, he went to 48 of the, 64 games, being driven from one game to the other in a helicopter. And I think the only reason he didn't get to more is because they were on at the same time, or it was like physically impossible. And they covered hundreds of thousands of miles and stuff. It does sound like a lot more fun than the life that these other guys lead, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, can you imagine Messi at Studio 54, no thanks. He'd be in and out, one glass of water, cheerio. He wouldn't be interested in the least to see Grace Jones naked on a white horse.
Someone sent me a thing the other day, and it was a little clip of Pele and Maradona speaking to each other, and they didn't know that the cameras were on, and they were talking about Messi, and Pele was like, "Do you know Messi?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know him. He has no personality."
Is that right?
Yeah, it's quite nice. Anyway, I agree. Like that last life, and it's very much the kind of shortest part of the book. It's not. I didn't find that all that interesting. There's a lot of names of German football administrators. Wasn't really like I did find parts of this book very interesting, but some of it I thought was a bit of a struggle. I wasn't drinking whiskey on a cruise though, so maybe that's why.
No, maybe not. Yeah, that's it. I absolutely wolfed it down, and I found him a very endearing figure. To be honest, I found him just quite a likable, open-minded cove who sort of just knocks along with the slings and arrows of life. He seemed, but whilst at the same time being an absolutely, I can't stress this enough, so good at football. He's so good. Just, watch some clips of the highlights. The highlights of the, I think it's 1970, where he's dislocated his arm against Italy. And there's one clip where he runs past three men with his arm in a sling. It's absolutely astonishing. It's so good, and he looks so great when he's doing it.
You say the slings and arrows of life, but this is a man who was born under a lucky star, if ever there was one. Okay, up until a point, like as in towards the end. Like he had this problem with the 2006 World Cup, but he was caught. He was caught tax dodging years previously, and nobody gave a fucking toss, But there wasn't very many slings and arrows for Beckenbauer. He lived a remarkable life.
Yeah, he did. And he seemed to really get the most. I mean, he did get the most out of it. Yeah, the only one of three players to have won the World Cup and managed a World Cup winning side. Yeah, there's not much he didn't do. I don't know how much more you could possibly want to do.
So Deschamps is one of them. Who's the first one? It was before Beckenbauer.
Zagallo, Walter Zagallo with Brazil. He won it twice. He won the World Cup and then he won it twice as manager. So, and once again as assistant manager in '94. Yeah, he wasn't a particularly great father. He says his son actually made it as a professional footballer, but it says here that Franz Beckenbauer watched him less than 5 times play. So that's supportive.
But you mentioned earlier he went to New York without his family. His wife went for something at the start thinking she was going to move there, and he's like, no, you're not coming. Like he's a self-serving individual, all Franz. Family man.
Yeah, he was.
So, okay, you obviously love this book. You love Franz Beckenbauer and you love Adidas clothing.
Yeah, I think the whole three things seem to just every kit that I watched, they're all so great. I mean, the 1990 West Germany kit, is so lovely. I really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed the writing. I found Uli Hesse's writing to be quite amiable and jovial all the way through. I thought Beckenbauer seemed like a fun enough cove. Yeah, not a great family man, perhaps. But once again, it was genuinely when I went to watch the footage that I really was like, oh, he was good. He was really good. Not as a goal scorer, but just so elegant, so deliciously elegant. He looks like a modern day footballer.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as you. I did enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much as you did. I did like the style of the book. I think often with these books, I just don't think they need to be so long and so detailed. Yeah, maybe we should start just reading more summaries of these books.
Yeah, we just start reading long reads in The Guardian, that'll do.
Yeah, exactly.
Review the long read in The Guardian, 3,000 words. Lovely.
How many Der Schlaps would you give this out of 5?
I'll give this 4 Der Schlaps out of 5. A fun book. How many Der Schlaps will you give it, Johnny?
I was 3.5 is what I thought. 3.5 Der Schlaps.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I think I've learned a lot about Franz Beckenbauer. I didn't know a lot of this.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing. We've kind of arrived at this realization that these books are a lot more interesting than a lot of the more recent ones by, kind of bit part players, or not bit part players, but you know, your Nobles, your Milners, but these truly iconic Mount Rushmore characters, as you call them, these books are always interesting because of who they are, because of the lives that these people have led, and the effect that they've had on football and the development of football, and yeah, everything about it.
Yeah, he shaped the modern game, and the modern game would not be as it was without Franz Beckenbauer, and that's the same you could say of Cruyff and Maradona.
But interestingly enough, the author says that whereas Cruyff was a tactical visionary, Beckenbauer was just a lot more pragmatic in his approach. And he didn't have any great mind for kind of footballing tactics as a manager.
Yeah, and that pragmatism won him the fucking World Cup. What did Johan Cruyff ever win? Fuck all.
Did he not win loads of stuff with Barcelona?
Didn't win the World Cup, did
he? No, he didn't win the World Cup.
Case closed.
Yeah. I'm still a Cruyff man, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm a Beckenbauer man now, Johnny. There you go. Lovely stuff. I'm going to get myself a lovely Adidas Beckenbauer Germany shirt. We can have a Cruyff one and we'll run around the garden. Lovely stuff.
Okay, so next week we have another injury time. We're returning to, actually, Franz Beckenbauer, I think, did a song, didn't he?
Do a line, and I've listened to it, and it is shit. Yeah, really bad song. I
bet you that was Robert Schwann's work.
Yeah, it was. We got a song here for you. Do a line.
What is it? Yeah, we're back with the international version of the Top of the Pops. So more like a Eurovision, I guess. Next week, and then the following week, it is
Di Stefano.
Di Stefano. What's the name of that book?
Yeah, it's called Di Stefano by Ian Hawkey.
Okay, Al. Thank you very much. Dankeschön.
One quote just pops up when I click on this book. It's from Diego Maradona, and it says, "Better than Pele." Lovely.
Lovely, Diego. Okay, cheers, buddy.
Thank you, Johnny.
Let your body spin like there is nothing in life but dancing. I can't keep my hands off you, as if this looked like